Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. From Kansas City, we are joined by the mayor of Kansas City, mayor of the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, Quinton Lucas. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be with you. I like to take credit for the Super Bowl. 6 months as mayor, already won Super Bowl.
You know, if the voters could have decided the one person that promised a Super Bowl championship, if you could have made that promise, they'd have believed it. I think you'd have won by a landslide.
Well, you know, so many people have asked me, what was a bigger night, when I won the election or when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl? The Chiefs winning the Super Bowl by far has been the most fun.
Well, you've come in, obviously got off to a tremendous start in Kansas City.
Yep.
Tell folks from a statewide perspective your story. It's a compelling story. I think maybe folks have heard parts of it, but tell folks from around the state how you became the mayor of Kansas City.
Well, you know, it's a story kind of hard work for my family. So I'm raised by a single mother, never met my father, was born in Kansas City, Missouri, but for a few years kind of living close to an uncle who was in the Air Force. We actually lived in Hutchinson, Kansas, so that's given me some ability to understand rural America, I think, a little bit better. Came back to Kansas City, finished middle and high school there, went to college in St. Louis, all the while experiencing some things along the way. Homelessness, certainly needing to catch the bus all the time, and frankly, the importance of hard work. My mother still lives in the inner city in Kansas City. I have two sisters. They have a ton of kids, but that kind of gave me the opportunity to see how local government could make a difference.
There's a quality you have. I've watched you as you've moved through the Missouri Capitol. I watch you interact with people that have very different political views in different parts of the state. There's always a little St. Louis, Kansas City push-pull. I've watched you come in. It seems like you have an empathy and a way to relate to people that maybe don't agree with you, but maybe you can drill down to find the things you can agree on. Right. That quality, does it come from some of the hard times you've had? Some of the there's a humbleness to a person that's achieved your station in life that most people don't have in that station.
Well, you know, I have been lucky. I think I always realized every step of the way just how fortunate I was, and I saw people around me who didn't have some of the opportunities I did, so I want to make more. But one story I remember from my upbringing has probably stuck with me since. So I'm in this town, Hutchinson, and you know, there were these other dads, white guys, conservatives, who made sure that I could get a Cub Scout project done, right? And I would hang out with their sons and that sort of thing. And in that, they weren't judging me. They weren't judging my mother. They weren't judging our circumstances. They weren't looking at us as different. There were a bunch of folks who were probably from drastically different political views who just cared about a kid having opportunities. And I think I actually learned a lot from them. And ever since I've said, you know what, you know, I see so much commonality. You know, we like football. We want our families to be safe. We want all of these same basic things. That's what I think we need to realize in politics a lot more. It's frankly why I love local government, because I won't speak for other cities in our state, but in Kansas City, nonpartisan really means something. You can get deals done. You can figure out how to keep things moving. And frankly, we can kind of work together.
Let me ask you this. You come out recently with a new approach to economic development.
Yeah.
You've changed some things around. Give me the short version of how you're approaching economic development in Kansas City.
You know, it's this way that, frankly, I've seen people from the left and right were telling me for years. We've got to rethink how we're doing economic development. It can't just be huge tax breaks. It can't always be just looking at one giant project in the middle of the city. You've got to support businesses that are already in Kansas City, that are already in Missouri. You've got to, frankly, take a look at how costs that we create on them are part of a barrier to entry to economic development. Not everything is that people need a tax break. Sometimes they just say, we want you to get projects done faster at City Hall. And so
that's a big thing around the state. A lot of times there's a time value to money, and people just want you to make a decision.
Right. You know, I catch so many people who say, look, we can get the deal done, just get rid of all of these bureaucratic hurdles. We don't need your tax breaks. And so I think that's what we've tried to right size. We have a very active Port Authority of Kansas City too, and we've said we want you all to focus once again on riverborne commerce, on commerce around rail lines, some of the classic stuff that all this stuff was created for. And I think what we've seen is, frankly, lots of the public say, you know what, that makes sense. So that we're actually not just having an economic development policy that's a big luxury hotel in Kansas City, and those are great too, but making sure that we're doing things like creating more jobs in the Northland, looking at how we can support small businesses on the east side of Kansas City, looking at for how we can help home builders north and east in Kansas City. Lots of folks, because as you know well, that's a place where we can generate a lot of wealth. And there are a lot of folks, a lot of guys, let's say in the east side of Kansas City right now, who can hire people who need opportunities. That's where I want to see EcoDevo.
So the thing that I think folks in St. Louis are desperately dealing with, the folks in Kansas City, Springfield, there's a crime epidemic that is hit. Some folks say it's gun policy, some folks say it's other things, but there's no question violent crime in Missouri has went up recently. You get elected to this job. you've kind of caught this right as the tidal wave was coming up in Kansas City. What do you really do about it? Not just the, okay, we'll lock everyone up forever.
Yeah.
What do you do to stop the problem?
Well, a few things. First of all, I think we have to continue to message on how important it is. People shouldn't get used to this level of violence. It's intolerable. And I'm never going to be one who sits back, and I gave a speech last night on it. I'm never going to sit back and just say it's okay. A few different things we need to do. One, and frankly, it hits every step. It's not police or social services. It's a mix of both.
Yeah.
You gotta look at a few things. First of all, we have a jailing issue in Kansas City, Jackson County, where we need to make sure that folks that are committing serious crimes are actually locked up for them. That's one key and important step. Another part is, and I think this is important, make sure you're supporting your local police department. That's why, again, in Kansas City, we're going to increase the number of officers. But all of us realize that incarceration and officers isn't everything. We've been working with the Kansas City Public Schools to make sure we're teaching more conflict resolution to our young people in Kansas City, teenagers, that sort of thing, who one fight, one thing gets them out of school, they're on a different path. And fundamentally, we're seeing that we need more trauma treatment. So much of our murder in Kansas City, and I know in the city of St. Louis, is retaliation for past offenses, past slights. We need to make sure when we have people shot, in Kansas City last year, we had 500 people who were shot and lived. We need to make sure that we're saying, hey, look, we're going to intervene. We're going to intervene on that before you're overreacting. And that's both with attention from police, that's attention from social workers. We're really trying to make sure that we're creating barriers to that bad action.
Even more immediate. I've always been a Republican. But
Yes, sir.
I say I criticize Republicans. People talk about running government like a business.
Yeah.
Well, you have people that come out of jail, and it's harder to get a job, and you don't have any money saved up generally.
Right.
Some of the infrastructure that other people have family-wise are not there. You come out and you have recidivism rates. If you really want to run government like a business, you would invest some money in stemming those things, making entry back into society easier so you don't have to end up incarcerated. I mean, if you just take all the emotion, whatever the right thing to do is out of it, you're looking from a business perspective,
Right.
It doesn't make sense to not try to give people a chance to become productive members of society.
I think that's absolutely right. I talked last night about a friend of mine who's a U.S. Army vet and smokes marijuana. And yeah, it's illegal, all this sort of stuff, but you know what? He uses these minor amounts. He's got 3 kids. He's trying to take care of his family. That's the sort of person you say, all right, how can we make them productive in society? How can we make new opportunities, not let them get behind? And that's what I think we need to look at all of our policies for. Because, you can throw the book of the people to the cows come home. Sure. And frankly, we've been doing that in America for about 25 to 30 years, particularly in drug policy. You can hire all the police in the world, but you got to make sure that we're actually saying when people come back home, when they're paroled back, there's something for them to do. There's an opportunity for them. There's a way for them to get beyond the life that they know. And frankly, and I know it sounds wishy-washy, but that there's some level of hope in their lives. I was blessed to have that. And you know what? Never met my father in my life. When we were moving around house to house, when we were homeless at times, I always knew that through an education there was something ahead for me. And I think we need to try to make sure we're building that for more Missourians every day.
In your life, what do you attribute hanging on to that hope to?
Maybe 3 different things. One of them has been faith for me, and I'm far from the most pious. So my Baptist church is going to see this and say, he ain't been here for 2 weeks. But nevertheless, that was part of it. I think another part of it was, I saw the example of my mother. I was talking to her the other day, and I said, and nothing against anybody who's on benefits or anything like that, but I said, you never took them. And why was that? And she said, well, I was always going to work. I'll just go to work every day. And I think I saw from that the real way you get yourself forward are things like finishing your education, going to work and all of that, and that meant a lot for me. And then finally, there were a lot of good people along the way who stopped and cared. I mentioned that dad when I was a Cub Scout. Mm-hmm. There were good people in Kansas City who said, hey, let me create an opportunity for you. Frankly, during my time in St. Louis, there were people that said, you know what, I see some opportunity in you. And that's why I try to, wherever I am, and no matter the background of the person, try to make sure I see that in somebody else.
You're the mayor of Kansas City. I'm just a simple West Butler County hillbilly. But one of the things I love is when you talk about regular issues like potholes. Yeah. I think it goes to your pride in your city. How did you stumble on this? And how do you, when it snows 6 times in the winter, that creates them? How do you really keep a handle on that?
I think one thing you have to recognize, and this gets us all the time in not only local government, but sometimes even in state government, we get so distracted by the stuff that nobody normal actually cares about, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, heck, you spend your days in the state capitol, right? And we will spend our time at City Hall, the state capitol, talk about this issue, and then you go talk to somebody else out in the real world, and they don't know what in the heck you're talking about.
I spent $200 on a tire because the street's tore up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they want you to fix it. And the other thing that's important, whether you're the mayor or city councilman or the governor of Missouri, right? People want you to fix all those issues they know. If they had a problem with their Social Security check, they'll call you about it. And so I think potholes was one of those where when I was campaigning and as a councilman, I saw that people were saying, all right, yeah, it's all well and good. You brought some great program to Kansas City. Yeah, what you gonna do about my car that just, I blew out a tire on? And so that got me to say, in some ways, it's a reflection of basic services too. For me, it's not just about potholes, it's about how do you actually make sure we're taking care of infrastructure, making sure we're delivering the promises we have. And in terms of fixing it, it's making sure that, we have taxes to fund them already. Making sure those sales taxes are spent on deferred maintenance. That's something that we need to do throughout Missouri. It's making sure that we actually have staff that's accountable on filling those potholes, doing that deferred maintenance. So that's how I address it.
Let's talk a little politics before you go. Democratic presidential primary, Bernie Sanders has won.
Yeah.
Being a Republican, I don't want to sound like I'm getting somebody else's business, but it does look like, I believe this state's good with two viable parties. Bernie Sanders may be popular in parts of the country and even parts of the state. I'm sure he is. It seems like if you're Nicole Galloway, that is a heavy lift in Missouri if he's at the top of the ticket.
I will say that, and I haven't endorsed a candidate, and there's a reason for that, because I haven't seen anybody who's really speaking to me yet. I would hope that as Democrats around the country are making choices before we get to in Missouri, they realize, frankly, those common sense issues are important to us. Those issues of how do you make people's everyday life better? How are you speaking to people where they are? Frankly, how are we making sure that we know moderation isn't a bad word? I've talked to Nicole Galloway a lot. I've talked to a lot of Missouri Democrats who are saying, yeah, we want to make sure we're talking about the Missouri Democratic Party that looks like what we knew with Mel Carnahan, right? We don't want to necessarily... That won.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to have to defend necessarily what AOC or somebody else elsewhere in the world is proposing. And I recognize they've had success in other parts of the country, but I'm worried about Kansas City. I'm worried about winning races here.
When it comes down to it, it looks to me like you have some folks that are very passionate supporters of ideology and a candidate versus maybe the balancing test of we want to win the White House. And maybe that every party has to face that.
That's right.
At the end of the day, give me your prediction. How does this end up?
Oh, man, on the Democratic side, I think Mr. Sanders has some energy behind him, and I don't know where that gets caught up. We'll get through our Midwestern states soon. Mike Bloomberg is dropping a ton of money, and I think, frankly, you're seeing that reflect itself in some of the polls. I think the biggest question is if Vice President Biden actually hangs on. South Carolina is going to be a huge test. So I haven't given a real prediction other than to say there's going to be a man over 70 who I think gets the nomination.
I wouldn't take that bet.
Oh!
Mr. Mayor, I thank you for joining us. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, thanks so much.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel, but first I want you to go to showmissouri.com, the history of Missouri one county at a time. Sheridan County, the home of General Price, more history than maybe any other county in the state. Showmissouri.com and learn about the state's history. We'll be right back after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. The Democratic primary season's heated up, and we are here with 3 Democrats to talk about presidential politics and how it can affect the state and whatever issues Jeremy LaFaver wants to come up with. Seriously, speaking up, thanks for joining us again, Jeremy. I love the shirt. Just let's do it from the beginning so people don't have to squint.
That's right. It's my favorite Super Bowl shirt. I wore it special for you.
Sharpest wit in the Fountain City. Ryan Myers, alderman in Raytown, correct, and running for state senate.
Yep, that's correct. First term in Raytown and running for District 9 in Missouri.
First time on the show. Welcome to it.
Thank you.
John Mayfield, friend of the show, former representative from Independence. Thank you very much for coming and joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Let's just start off in the beginning. You've got a Democratic field. Missouri, I believe, used to be a state where you'd vote for a Republican for president, a Democrat for governor. Less and less of that happens in our state anymore. It's been the last 10 years for sure. Mm-hmm. The Democratic presidential race will affect every race down the ballot for Democrats. Right now, I mean, it looks like Bernie Sanders is building ahead of steam, right?
Well, I guess it depends who you talk to. I think we've kind of a split decision right here. I think people need to understand this is a marathon, not a sprint.
But it's usually a sprint.
Well, Missouri has 78 delegates we're going to award in about 3 weeks. So far to date, we've awarded 65 to several different people. It's still early. This feels more like 1992 to me. Bill Clinton finished 4th in Iowa behind a guy named Uncommitted, did not win New Hampshire, and went to the South, and he did very well, and I think that may happen again this time.
I mean, it looks to me, and this comes from a simple Republican hillbilly from the boot hill, that you have Bernie Sanders, who would be very challenged to actually win the presidency with a head of steam. Biden seems to be fading. I personally thought Biden would defeat Trump nationally by a pretty significant margin and maybe make Missouri close. But nationally, can you stop Bernie Sanders, and who would do it?
It feels like at this point that it's sort of heading in the direction of, Bernie and then the Democrats, because of course Bernie Sanders has never been a Democrat.
You and Jane Duke are very quick to remind folks of that. I love it.
Well, it's easy to remind them of that when he's got 30 years or 50 years of experience not being a Democrat.
And he's not a Democrat. What is he?
He's an independent.
Well,
but
there's another
calls
word that he's
himself
in
a
there?
Democratic socialist.
A socialist, yes.
A Democratic one.
Now, Raytown, good, hardworking people. Would surprise me if there's that many people that believe you just get free stuff without working in Raytown.
No, not so much. We're very union-based. You might see some support in Bernie. I'm waiting to see how Super Tuesday works out, see what kind of influence that's going to have, but it's definitely going to be an interesting race.
Explain to me, because I would bet of the places in Missouri where Bernie Sanders has support, your old district probably has some supporters. Give folks that maybe see this and they don't understand, give a mindset into Bernie Sanders' appeal to people in Missouri.
I think it's
because it's real, it's significant.
I think it's a similar appeal that folks have for Donald Trump. It's a populist message, and it's not based in a lot of policy. There's some policy thought in there, but largely his appeal is on a feeling of people who are fed up with people who have ignored them for too long, and politicians at their peril will ignore that. There's something very real about that, and people need to pay attention and be a lot more real and relatable to just folks who are mad, and dismissing voters' anger was the peril of Hillary Clinton in the last election, and it could be the peril of folks if we decide that Bernie Sanders is the route to go.
I remember Trump said he would build a wall, which, okay, I thought he might. Then he said he would make Mexico pay for it, which I never believed that was real. I don't think many people that voted for Trump thought you could do that. When Bernie Sanders says you can have free college, you could have free cars, you could have free everything, you don't have to work. I think you may be right. People don't really believe that, but they support him because of the other reasons, stylistically and other things.
Yeah, stylistically, and they're just fed. He is somebody who will talk back to people that have been telling other folks what to do for a very long time, and that appeals to people who are angry. It's a very populist message.
So Bloomberg, you watch TV in Missouri right now, you're starting to see him on. You're starting to see the guy is probably really, when he said he's going to spend $1 billion, it's very challenging to get your head around, but he's making a run at it thus far, it looks like. He waits, is the theory, you wait until Sanders has eliminated a lot of other, if Biden doesn't do well in South Carolina, he's probably done. Klobuchar would be a natural opponent of his. You get down to where it's Bloomberg and Sanders, that strategy, it maybe looked like it was unlikely in the beginning. Doesn't look that unlikely now.
I think some preconceived ideas have kind of changed as we've gone along in this process. I think that Vice President Biden will do very well in Nevada and South Carolina. However, with Michael Bloomberg and his $1 billion out there, he's, I believe, third in South Carolina now, and he's been advancing the polls because he has a lot of money. Only way I see Michael Bloomberg winning the nomination is if there's a brokered convention, because most Democrats don't want Bernie Sanders because he's not been a lifelong Democrat. You don't really know what you're going to get. And like you said, people in my district are going to be like, really? You get something for nothing? That sounds like a con job to me. So I think it's going to be very interesting.
If Donald Trump draws Bernie Sanders as an opponent, I will believe he did a deal with Satan, and Satan's keeping his word. I mean, there's no way he could be that lucky, right?
Right.
Let me ask you a question. So if Bloomberg comes through, who is the person that's not Bloomberg? That is it an Amy Klobuchar? Nobody's talking about Pete Buttigieg. There is a former state senator from this part of the state who is a big fan of his. What is his appeal?
Well, I have to say that, especially Buttigieg, I think he has a chance. I can really relate with him being, a mayor and kind of moving up, kind of like I am, going from municipal level all the way up. He's going a few more steps than I am. But,
a couple more.
But I wouldn't rule him out yet. That's definitely one to look at, and it'll be interesting how he holds up in kind of the Midwest area.
I tend to think Eileen Weir would do as well as better than Pete Buttigieg in a lot of things. It could be that he hasn't seen a lot of scrutiny. He doesn't seem to have the support to really to win a Democratic nomination with his numbers with certain constituents of the Democratic Party that he just doesn't appeal to.
Well, you mentioned my mayor. She's a mayor who can get things done. If you want somebody to name a post office, go with Bernie Sanders.
Funny. Now, let's talk about Missouri. Let's talk about Missouri here. When you really take a step back, if you're Nicole Galloway, you've got to be watching this TV and going, oh, my God, what are you doing to me? I mean, I don't know that it's a viable path for her to be elected governor. She's an underdog anyway. Whoever runs against an incumbent is. Yeah. But I don't know that it's a viable path for her. If you saddle her with a person that'll tell you he's a socialist, Republicans usually have to try to call someone a socialist. This guy calls himself a socialist. Can that sell in Missouri? I
think the only folks that can help Nicole in her governor's race are going to be an Amy Klobuchar, a Biden. I think potentially a Buttigieg with the right kind of VP pick. I think his candidacy is underestimated in the sense of it's the message of inspiration and hopey, changey kinds of things that do inspire Democratic voters to come out and support him. Once he solves the problems that he's got with certain constituencies in the Democratic Party, absolutely. At the end of the day, the choice is Donald Trump and whoever the Democrat is.
Can you sort those out in a primary, though, in order to get votes in a primary?
It's going to be trickier, but there's a path there for sure.
Interesting dynamic there. In Missouri, who's the person that helps Nicole Galloway poll the best?
I would say Biden, Bloomberg, Klobuchar, possibly Mayor Pete, depending on the messaging and the VP pick.
I think Joe Biden keeps this a 8 to 10 point Trump victory in Missouri. I think Bernie Sanders. I think actually I'll give you a prediction. If Bernie Sanders is a nominee, Donald Trump, he got close to Abraham Lincoln's historic win in Missouri previously against Clinton. He will actually top Abraham Lincoln and win by the largest percentage anybody's ever won by.
Yeah, I would say if minus Bernie, if you got a B in your name, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be a viable candidate in Missouri.
I'd take that bet.
Keeping it short.
I'd take the under on that bet.
You think that he won't overperform himself over what he did against Clinton if Sanders is a nominee?
That's right.
Because of the anger?
Because of the anger and the populist message, and this is the skeptical Democrat in me, but I think people are far more sexist than they are anything, other stuff. Really? And I think that Hillary being a woman hurt her more.
People thought they were far more racist at one time too, and Barack Obama was such a good candidate. I think he overcame some of that, a lot of that, obviously enough to win. I thought Barack Obama wouldn't be elected president, frankly, but he proved that he was such a good candidate.
I think folks in this country tend to be far more sexist than they are racist, for sure.
Is it more a subtle sexism, or what do you mean?
It's just widely accepted.
Okay.
It's just, you look at our culture, you look at just the way we openly feel like we can sort of talk to and about and treat women. We would not even remotely consider that for somebody that's in a minority, so-called minority
I've seen
population.
a lot of Democratic primaries shaping up to where if it's the white heterosexual male running against a woman, running against a homosexual, African American, any minority, I've seen those candidates defeating the traditional white male candidate. Do you think that that's changing, but it's changing more in a Democratic primary because people agree with what you're saying and they want to compensate for that?
I don't know if they agree with it. I think it's less of a logical thought. I think it's just a feeling of the way the masses of people behave.
I wouldn't have thought that, but I think your argument has merit. I think you're probably right. saw about a couple of things that's happening.
We'll find out on Twitter what everybody else thinks after this airs.
Oh, gosh, yeah. It's always funny to see the Twitter people all excited, and then real life happens, and it's like, wait a minute, on Twitter this was supposed to happen. Well, no.
Right.
Let's talk about what's happening in the Capitol right now. You have a big debate every year on charter school funding. There's a wrinkle that you identified. What's the wrinkle that affects Kansas City here?
Yeah, so there's an issue in Kansas City where, because of the way the formula works, the way public schools are funded, right now if you send your child to a public charter school in Kansas City, their education is, by the formula, underfunded by about $600 to $1,100. And so there's a direct funding inequity. And we saw folks like MNEA sponsor an initiative petition to provide equitable funding, so they traditionally support those sorts of things. It's a democratic sort of thing. KCPS has worked with the charter schools, and they developed a memorandum of understanding to solve this for 1 year, but now there's a bill to fix it in the statute to make sure that all kids, no matter which public school you send your kid to, their education is valued the same.
Give me a prediction. Next year, do they pass charter school expansion throughout the state of Missouri?
That's a much more difficult fight, but I think that there's certainly a chance. There's a pathway there, and the more people, certainly in Kansas City, that engage with the charter school community. I mean, a large portion of South Kansas City is as vibrant and successful because their families feel like they have the opportunity to live where they want to live.
Large portion of this show is wrapping up those with a minute left. Who won the week?
Me?
Yeah.
I'd have to say Mayor of Kansas City. He had a great State of the City address last night, and I'm looking forward to all the great ideas that he has that he's looking forward to implementing.
Who won the week?
I'm choosing the more than 200,000 Missourians in northern Missouri that are going to have access to broadband with the installation of broadband in the Grain Belt Express.
A big deal. Who won the week?
I'm going to say the business community of Kansas City for coming out on Tuesday in favor of Medicaid expansion, particularly the Civic Council of Kansas City, Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, and the United Way of Greater Kansas City.
I'm going to say, I have to say, Jim Murphy, representative from South County, St. Louis. Jim Murphy filed a bill, and I'll even be bold enough to say here in Kansas City, he's limiting the expansion of the DH to American League parks. You couldn't do that in St. Louis. Jim Murphy, what a patriot, and clearly the winner of this week, maybe the year, maybe the decade. We will see you next week from the Farm Bureau Convention on This Week in Missouri Politics. Oh, come on now. That's a big line.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.